Hello, welcome to the first week of our C++ programming. My name is Godwin, and I'm the one instructing you for this course. Now, if you're on Kuulchat.com, you can get the course on courses, information technology, then C++ programming. Okay. This course is meant for everyone. There is no prerequisite for this course, but if you know C programming, it's a class because class is built on C programming. So what is the course objective? Is to understand how C++ in C with object-oriented features. You are to learn how to write inline functions for efficiency and performance. You are to learn the syntax and semantics of the C++ programming language. Then you are supposed to be introduced to the C++ classes. Then you also have to learn how to construct constructors and class member functions. Okay. So this is those who might have taken C programming. This will be an additional course for them in order to introduce them to the object-oriented programming. So, what are we going to study this week? Week 1, Introduction to C++ Programming. We'll see the differences between C and C++ programming. We'll talk about compiler. We'll talk about some of the IDE, Integrated Development Environment for writing C++ code. Then we'll create and run our C++ program. Then we'll talk briefly about variables, the scope of variables for this week. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so C++ is a cross-platform language that can be used to create for sophisticated high-performance applications. So many programming languages use C++ to build their platform. Then what are the differences between C and C++? C++ was built on C. So you can say that C is a subset of C++ because the components of C are also found in C++. Okay. Then in C programming, we don't have anything like object-oriented programming. Okay, so there is nothing like classes and other features like polymorphism, encapsulation, and inheritance. Okay, but in C++, you can see all these features over there. Okay, and the list continues. Then in C, we talk about input and output. We are using scanf and printf, but in C++, we use something different. We use a cin and the cout. So the cin is for taking in, cout is for display information. So those are some of the differences. So as we elaborate more on this course, you realize some of the differences as well. Now C++ is very useful and many have used it to build applications. Example, we have the Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Premiere, and ImageReady. All these ones were built on C++. And there are a number of games that were built on C++. We also have animations that were built on C++. And we have web browsers like Google Chrome and Mozilla. All these were built on C++. Then the database access was also built on C++, like the MySQL. Then a lot of even operating systems were also built on C++, like Microsoft, and also some few parts of the Apple operating system. So C++ is a very useful programming language that if you learn, it will be of good for you. And of course, once you also know that, you can easily learn other programming languages. So a compiler is a special program that processes statement written in a particular programming language and turns them into a machine language. So in order for programmers to easily write code that they can understand and other programmers can understand, we write it in our programming language that we learn, like how to do certain things. Then this will also be translated into a machine language. Machine language will be very difficult for most programmers to learn that language. And as a result, the compiler comes in where it serves like a translator. So you write the programming language, you are writing the environment you are writing in, and the compiler will convert it or translate into a machine language. Machine language are only understood by the computers. So then for the computers to understand your commands. So that's what we meant by compilers. Okay, so this example, if we have int a, b, and the sum, okay, then we have c in b, a, c in b, okay. This you later come to learn them. This is just an example. The c in is for taking an input from the user. So if you've taken the value of a, you've taken the value of b, and you've stored it in the memory space a and b. Now you did the sum, you added them, and you store it in the memory of sum. Okay, now you are able to print out the sum. Now this is a plain language. Even anyone who don't know programming language can read the text. The person can know that they can read the plain English language, like int a, comma, b, comma, sum, semicolon, c in greater than a, semicolon, c in greater than b, semicolon, sum is equal to a plus b, semicolon, c out less than sum less than nl, semicolon. Okay, so these are plain language that even anyone who has not learned C programming can read. But machine language can read this kind of text. So we needed a compiler to change this text into a machine language, which is made up of zeros and ones for the machine to understand. So that's why compiler comes in handy. So that when we write our code in the environment in which we understand, then the compiler will change it into the machine language so that we can communicate with the machine language. Now, when the machine language also gives us feedback after we commanding something and it wants to give us feedback, the compiler also has to translate it to us so that we can also understand what the machine is also saying, the computer is also saying. So that's what we meant by compiler. So that's an illustration of the compiler. And creating executable C++ file. Now, we can create C++ file in many ways, but the easiest way is using the integrated development environment, which is abbreviated as IDE. Okay, so integrated development environment is an interface that has been written for you, which incorporates the compiler. So you have an editor, a place where you'll be typing your code. So when you click on run, then the compiler will convert your code and check if there is error or not. Then if there is no error, then it will change into the machine language for to communicate with the machine. The machine will also give a feedback, and the compiler will also give you the feedback, so you can see the displayed information on the screen. So IDE is just an environment you, the programmer, you can type in your code, then you can click run, then you run your code for it to be executed. Okay, now there are a number of IDEs for compiling C++ programs. We have the Codeblocks, we have the Visual Studio Express, then we have the Div C++. Now, in this course, we are going to use the Codeblocks. So we will install the Codeblock, then we will create our first C++ program. So now let's get started. It says download Codeblocks at, so you need to visit this website, codeblocks.org. Now if you install the main w-setup, because this one has the compiler, and some of them you need to include another plugin in order for you to go to compile your programs, but this one has package, so you try to install this particular type. Okay, so we visit the website, there are a number of arrays that you can install. Try to install the one that this particular one we are asked to install, so that in the near future you don't have problems. But if you install any other one, you are running your code, it may tell you that it cannot find the comp. Okay, so we can this one. So you check also if your machine is 32, you install this one. If your machine is 32, but if it is 64, you can install this one. So you choose any of the binaries. You can get from sourceforge.net or Force Apps or any of them. So I'm choosing this one. Okay, so it says your download will start shortly, so we wait for it to start downloading. Okay, I hope it doesn't take longer time. So once your download is finished, you just double click on it. And you allow permission for installation. So you just click on next and agree to the terms, then next, then next. Okay. So if your installation is finished, you just launch your Codeblocks. So it's supposed to automatically come back. So now, if like I advise you, if you install that particular one, you see that automatically this one is included. But if you take any other executable files, now sometimes it will not see your compiler, so you have to reinstall a plugin to detect your compiler. But this one has everything, so you install that particular one. Now I was having a problem because I already have a code block which I want to install, but I didn't delete the folder. But if this is your first time of doing the installation, you won't have that alert that you saw on the screen. Okay, so just click on OK, then the code block will open. Then we can start our coding. So whilst it's opening, we'll come from the lecture notes and see. Okay. So when our code block starts, we are supposed to start a new C++ project. Okay. Okay. So it says Codeblocks is currently not the default application for source. Do you want to set it as default? So you can set it as default. So yes, so you can put it here. So any other associated C++ or C files, it will open with a code block. Okay, so you just click OK. Okay. Okay, so now let's create our first project. So from the lecture notes, it says go to create your first C program. You go to File, New, then Project. Now in the project, you choose console application because in this course we will only be writing console application to build our object-oriented programming skills. So once you are done, you just go. Then you click on Next. Then you choose C++ as your program you are writing. Now your project title. So you give the project a title. So based on the project you are doing, the title you write. So I can write mine first C++ project. Okay. Now you have to choose the path where your project is supposed to be saved. So it's better for you to create a folder and name it C++ or something so you can save your files in it. So if I create a folder So if I create a folder here, I call it C++, where I can save a new folder with C++. Okay, so I'll be saving my files here. Okay, so once you created a folder, you just browse. So we click on this folder browse button. So when you click, it will open the dialog. So you just browse to where your folder can be found. My folder is in E, so I move to my E, and it is in E, and that is the folder I want to use. So when you select, you just select folder. Okay, so once you selected, this is the folder you use to be saving your future projects and this one as well. So you just click on next. Then so this is a selected compiler. If you install a different version and it's not in your compiler, then you have to know that I recommended one for you and you didn't listen. Okay, so we continue. So you click on finish. Okay. Now you can see your source files over here. So normally it's hidden, so you have to click on this one. You have to click on the plus next to the sources. Then you click on this one. So you double click on the file. So when you double click on the file, anytime you create a C++ project, it will generate the hello world default program for you so that you can modify it. Okay, now to check if everything is working, you can run this code and see if you get the display of hello world on the console here over here. Okay, so to run your program here, when you make a change, you click on this one. This one is for build and run. So if you make any change, when you click on this one, it will automatically build and run, of course. But if you haven't made any change to, you can just use this one. So any of them works. But remember, this one, if you have made a change and you are running, it will not get the latest updated version. So normally, if you made a change, it's better to click on here because it will do the building, then it will run your program for you. Okay, so see hello world. Okay, so now this is a brief introduction to our C++ course. Now any text you write here in the double quotation, that's what will be displayed. This cout function is for displaying information on the screen. So if you have cout less than, then in the double quotation, whatever information you will put over there will be displayed. So let's say, for instance, I want to write my name. So I write my name is okay. Now when you save, then you run, you are supposed to see this text on the console application that my name is Godwin as shown on the screen. So you too can write any text here and run your code. Okay, so when it's green, it means it's running. When it's finished running, then you see the result. Okay, so you can see the text I wrote in the double quotation is what is being shown. So my name is Godwin Ashon. Okay, so that's our first C++ program. So I hope you've also been able to write your first C++ program and just change the text here. So change as much as possible so that it gets used to the cout function. So we'll be using this cout function a lot. So try to remember it by heart. Of course, I will not advise you to cheat code, but you should understand the use of the code, because if you have a code, you can make reference to it. But if you don't know how to use it, then even if you have the code, you cannot make reference to it. Okay, so know what the code are for and how to use them. That's what you need to do. So to display any information on the screen, you have to use cout, then less than, then the double quotation, you put the text inside. Then as time goes on, we'll come to see more features of our C program. So we will move on to the lesson and see which one we are left. So we've been able to create a C++ project. selected C++, we browse to where we want to save our project. And if you haven't created a folder, you saw me create my folder where I want to put there. So you also create your folder, then you browse to that place and put a project inside. Then the project name, and you enter the project name. So the project name, I'll advise you that you name it by the week, or by the week we are learning. So if we are doing the project for week 2, you name your project week 2, or you can have week 2, then if the project is about something, then you attach it to it. So, or you can create a week 2 folder, then in the week 2 folder you can be putting all the projects you do for week 2. Now why am I saying this? This is because when you want to make reference to your code, if you separated them in folders, then you know that when we were doing this topic, it was in week this number. So it's easy for you to go to that week number and get access to the source code, because like I advise you in programming, you don't have to cheat the code. You should know how to use the code, so you can make reference to your source code. Now, if you don't know where you can locate your source code, how do you go and check it and make reference to it? You get it? That's why you need to save it in order, in a way, in your own approach, that you can easily access your project whenever you need them. Okay. Now we come to our introduction to our C programming. Now we'll talk about variables. Okay. Now, variables in a layman English. For example, if you want to go and fetch water and you don't reserve a place where you store the water. Now, maybe you only have one bucket. So you went with the one bucket, but you need more water. What will you do? You need to get a reservoir, a place that when you bring the water, you are going to pour it into it. And anytime you need to fetch water, you go to that reservoir and fetch that water. It's the same thing with C programming. Any information you put on the computer, we put them on the memory, and you need to reserve a space on the memory for that information before you put the information over there. Because if you haven't reserved a space and you want to put information there, then how does it work? You understand? Like in the scenario of the water fetching, before you go and you only have one bucket, but you need to fetch more than that. You need to have a reservoir where when you bring that one bucket, you pour it inside. When you bring it, you pour it inside. And anytime you need that water, you can go and fetch it. It's the same thing with the memory. When you variable declaration is to create a space on the memory, so that if you want to store any information there, you can put that information there. Now, when you want to get the value or the information you put there, then you can fetch it also from there. Okay, so that's what we refer to as variables. Now, there are rules for naming for variables, and that's what we come to talk about it. Now, he said the name of a variable can be composed of letters, digits, and the underscore character. It must begin with either a letter or an underscore. So take notice. It must begin with either a letter or an underscore. So if you begin with a number or digit, my friend, then you get a syntax error because you are not following the rules. Programming is about rules. It says it must either be a letter or an underscore. So you can't do anything otherwise. A letter starts from A to Z. So it can either be any of them or an underscore. You know what an underscore is. If you don't know, Google underscore. So it's either a letter or an underscore that can start the name of your variable. Okay. Then it can be upper or lowercase letters. And upper and lowercase letters are distinct because C++ is case sensitive. So C++ is case sensitive in such a way that if you write name, one capital N and another small n, they are seen as two different variables. So if you are calling the capital N and you write small n, you get a syntax error because they are not of the same type. You get it? So you try to understand that in C++, variables are case sensitive. In other programming language, it's not case sensitive. But C++ is case sensitive. So the case you write your variable names, you must remember. Okay. Now, variables name should also not contain space. So let's say, for example, if you want to write a variable name, first name. So first name, the first and the name, you can't leave a space between the first and the name. Variable name should never have a space between them. So if it's more than one word, you have to separate them either by an underscore or the next word, the beginning one, you can make it a capital letter so that it will make it different from the first word. But you can't leave a space between them. Okay. Now, when you are declaring a space, in order to know how much space to reserve on the memory, you need to add the data type to it because each of the data type is the amount of size that the memory is reserved for. So you need to associate the data type and the name of the variable you are giving to it. So when you give the variable a name, it's like you are reserving a space on the memory and you're giving it that particular name where you'll be storing that information over there. Now, there are a number of variable data types. You have the bool. So the bool is for storing true or false. So true or false. For example, if you declare a variable for to check if someone is underage, so it's either the person is underage or it's not underage. So either true or false. So that one you can declare the variable as bool. Okay. So that one the data type is going to be bool. Then you also have char. Char is for a single character. So a single character is what we refer to as a char. So a char can be A, it can be C, it can be B, it can be D, it can be E. Remember, it cannot be EF. It's a char is only single character. So it can't be EF. It must be only a single character. Okay. Now we have int. Ints are for integers. You know what an integer is. An whole number is an integer. So if you are creating an application where the kind of information you are going to store is going to be an whole number, then you need to declare that variable as int. I hope it's clear. So for example, if I'm writing an application to store the ages of students, I know ages normally we don't approximate it to decimals. We only use the actual whole number part. I'm 20 years, I'm 30 years, I'm 15, I'm 14, I'm 10. You never hear somebody saying I'm 10.5 or I'm 10.4. No. So when declaring the ages, you can declare the age variable as an int. Okay. Now we also have float. And float variables are decimals. So decimal variables, we call them float. So decimals, decimals are fractions. So point something. So if you're writing an application that it may contain fractions, then you declare your variable as double or float. Double and float are all for decimals, but just that the double is a little bigger than the decimals, but than the float. So if you want an accuracy in terms of approximation, then you prefer to choose a double because double has huge significant figures than the float, but they are all for decimal numbers. Okay. So for example, if you are creating an application to save the salary of workers, now you know salaries, there can be decimals. Somebody can be given 10, maybe 700.5 or 700.75 and the rest. Or if you are creating maybe an application for a banking company, they also deal in decimals because some subtractions may be point something. Okay, so those variables that you declare, they are supposed to be double or float because they will contain what? Decimal figures. Okay, then we have the void data type. The void data type is normally empty. So in the absence of any of the above data types, it's the void. So it doesn't have any data type at all. Normally we use a void when we are writing functions. So when we get to functions, we will talk about void. Okay, now how are variables declared? So this is the way we declare variables. First, you have to specify the data type. So the variable type is any of the ones we've specified here. Based on the type of information you'll be storing on the information, what comes here should be any of these, except this one. This one we only use it in function. So 2, 3, 4, 5. So it could be any of these 5. So what comes here could be any of these 5. It could be bool, it could be char, it could be int, it could be float. So any of these of the above 5 can come over here. Okay, then you leave a space. You see that there is a space here. Okay, then you give the variable a name. So like I explained, the name cannot begin with a digit. So it can be any letter or an underscore. So for example, if I'm naming a space on the memory where I will be saving first name there, then I can save my variable as first name without a space between the first and the name. If I want to reserve a space on the memory to save last names of people, then I can declare my variable as last name with no space between the last and the name. Then if I want to store ages of students or people on the memory and I want to declare the variable, I can declare it as ages. Okay, so in that way it follows all the rules. If for example ages it starts with A, it doesn't start with 1, so it's correct. There's no space in it, so it's correct. Okay, and it doesn't have any special character. So now we continue. Then it's supposed to end with semicolon. Now all syntax statements that we write in C++, they are supposed to end with a semicolon so that we know you finish with your line. So when you write another line, we know that the top one has already been completed. So any syntax line of code that you write, you're supposed to end it with a semicolon. The same way with declaring variables. Okay, so now these are examples. We have int A, int B, int C. Remember the I is supposed to be small I. So int A, int B, int C, int D. Okay. Now it's also possible if the variables are the same data type, you can declare one data type, then you can declare the variable names. You just put them by comments. So we know that all these variables are of the type of int. Okay, so the same way you can declare for this, then the same way you can declare for char. So it means all these two variables are char. The same way you can declare for this f and this salary. We know that all of them are for what? Double. Okay, so now let's take examples. Then we run our code. Then you see if we get a syntax error or not. Okay, so now we are going to declare a variable int a. Okay, then int b, c. Okay, then double. Remember, when you write the data type, you leave a space. So double maybe salary. Okay. Now, data types cannot appear more than one because we can reserve a space on the memory and give them the same name. So it doesn't work. So if you want to store, if you name them AA and you want to store something in A, how would the memory know that it's this A or is that A? So variable names, you can use them only once. You can't repeat it. For example, if I write int A again, I'm going to get a compiler error because it tells me that it has already been declared. Okay. So now, first of all, I'll take off this, we'll run and you see if we will not get any error. Now I'll come to run this, then you see the error we will get. Okay, so click on this. If there's no error, the program will run. If there's error, I'll be informed. Okay, so you could see that the program runs. It's my antivirus that is helping me. I don't know. Okay, so you see that the program runs. Now I'll undo it. Now we'll do the errors I talk about and see if we get error. So first, declaring a variable name which has already been declared, and let's run and see if we get an error. Okay, oh you are. So you saw, have you seen it? So you saw that this one is complaining because we've already declared our A here. So you cannot redeclare a variable, and it makes sense because if you said reserve this space on the memory and give it a name A, and you are not the same person, you come again and say reserve this another space and give it A. Now if you bring something to store, how will I know that it's this A that I want to put, I have to put it there, or is that A that I have to put it there? Okay, so when you are declaring the variable, their names must be unique. You cannot have more than one variable of the same name. No, it doesn't work. Okay, now let's try to declare another variable and start with a digit, and let's see what we will get. So let's say 1B. Okay, let's see if it will work. Okay, so you see, so you cannot declare a variable by a digit, starting with a digit. You can take off the 1. It can be underscore acceptable. So you can have an underscore B. That one is acceptable. Like we said, a variable name should begin with either an underscore or a letter. Any other beginning is incorrect. You get a syntax error. So that's the explanation of this. Now, if I run this, you see that this one will run because underscore is acceptable to begin variable name. Okay. And why is it complaining? Okay. So it worked. Okay, so it worked. It was only given a warning, but it worked. So underscore is acceptable. Okay, now let's try another one where we'll leave a space. Let's try another one where we'll leave a space. Right? Let's say D and E. Instead of us joining them together, we've left a space here between them. Like we said, you can't leave a space when you are declaring the variable, because you will not see them as one variable. Okay, so if you are writing the name, for example, if I write maybe Char CN, okay, now if it's more than one, it is supposed to be separated by a comma, but if you left a space, then how would the listener know that this is what it's supposed to be? You get it? So when you are declaring a variable, make sure there's no space between the variable name. Okay, so now you see that you are getting a syntax error. Okay, so it's either this and this joined together, or there's a separation, which means that this is a char on its own and this is a char on its own. So I believe everything is clear. So we'll move on with our lectures. Okay, so we've done this, and then we can variable scope. Okay, so there are a number of variable scope. A scope is the region of your variable. Okay, now we have inside a function or a block which is called a local variables. Now we'll come to learn about function. Now if you declare a variable in a function, they are called local variables. So later on when we learn a function, you will see more examples. So we can declare a variable within a function. We call them local variables. Now we also have function parameters. In a function, we also have parameters that when we call the function, it's like more of input. So we input, then we process those inputs, then we get an output. Okay, so those variables, the function is what we call the parameters. So they are also variables. Now we also have the ones which are outside of functions, which are called global variables. So global variables are outside of all functions. So they are on top of your function. So that one, it can be used in any other parts of the functions. Okay. So now int main is a function on its own. So int main is a function. So all these ones are called local variables because they are in this function. Later on, we'll come to know about functions because they are in this function. So they can only be used over here. You can't use it at any other place outside this function. The function begins with a curly bracket and ends with the curly bracket, the closing curly bracket. Okay, so this A and B can only be used within this region. If you come and call it here, you get a syntax error because it's not being seen over here. You declare it over only here, so you are to use it locally over only here. Okay, now if you put it outside, the global variables are the ones outside. So you put a variable outside a function, then like any variable here which is not a function, then that variable is global, so that one it can be accessed anywhere in the function. Okay, so now these are examples. So global variables are defined outside of all the functions which are on top of the program. A global variable can be accessed by any function. So any function can access the global variable and it can be used throughout the program. So for example, because this is outside our function, it's not in any function, this is a global variable. So we can call it over here. We can call G here and there won't be any problem. We can call G here and there will not be any problem. We will not face any problem over here. Okay, so I believe it's clear. Okay, then we also have the local variable, which can only be accessed over here. Okay, but 5 is a global variable. Okay, now we come to function parameters. So the function parameters, like I explained to you, what we take the argument. So this is a function, example int sum. Sum, this is the name of the function, and these are the parameters. So it means if you are summing two numbers, you need to pass 1 and 2 numbers. So you need to pass this one and you need to pass this one to the sum function. So the summation of this and that will be done, then the value will be returned. Okay, so when we get to function, we'll talk more about this. But this is just a summary of what we mean by parameters for the type of variables which is of the type parameters. Okay, so now we will demonstrate global variable example. Then that will be the end of our this week section. So in the week, an assignment, it says a program application that you would like to create and the possible variables and their types to use. Write their declaration. Example. Okay, so now in this assignment, if you want to write an application to register students, okay, now your registration of students, now the possible variable name can be first name. Okay, here is supposed to be last name, so it can be first name, last name, and age. Okay, now in the declaration, if the variable type here is char, and here is char, and here is char, then the declaration is going to be, you said the variable type comes first, so char, then you leave a space, then the variable name comes, then you end with a semicolon. The same with this, this supposed to be last name. So here, last name, if the variable type is char, then you have char, then the last name, leave a space, then the last name comes, then semicolon. Remember, the variable names doesn't have any space, doesn't have a digit or this, it follows the rule for naming variables. Okay, so that's what the motive of this assignment, so that I will check if you fully understood how variable names are declared. Now, as a programmer, the variable names, you have the right to choose whatever variable names you want to use. but it's appropriate to use a variable name that relates what you'll be storing on the memory. So if I'll be storing first name on the memory, why should I name it Kofi or Amba or Ajua or Abina? Even though synthetically, in terms of syntax, it is correct, it doesn't make sense for other programming to be reading. Then we'll wonder, what is Amba? What is Kofi? What is Abina? What is Ajay? What is this? What is that? No. But if you use first name, any programmer knows that you'll be storing the first name of people on that memory. So it makes it easy for them to understand your code when they're reading. If you name a variable, you reserve a space on a memory, you name it age. Any other person will know that, oh, okay, so you'll be storing the ages of people there. Okay, so your choice of variable names should connote the type of information you'll be storing on the memory. So that if somebody is reading your code, the person can follow. You'll be surprised that you write a code today, you yourself, the next day or the next 1 week, you'll be going through your code, you may not even understand, even though you wrote it yourself. So that's why you need to follow some programming guidelines so that your code that you write will be appropriate for you yourself and also for other people who may be editing or reading or running your code. Okay, if you work in the company, after a number of years, there will be a new guy that may be working on your code. So if the person you write a code that is difficult to understand, and the person comes, how is he going to edit your code? It will be difficult for the person. Get it? So that's why you need to follow this rule. Make sure the type of code you are writing should relate what the code is all for. Okay. Now, to take examples of our local and global variable, then that will be the end of the lesson. So we'll write it in our code. So one, we want to write, let's say, int gene. Okay, then we can give it a value of maybe 5. Okay, now we can have int a, we can give it a value of, let's say, 4. Okay, now we can have, let's say, b is equal to g plus a. Okay, now remember that g is declared over here. It's declared over here. But it is declared over here. We will be able to access it here. We'll be able to access it here because Dean is over here, which is not in any function. Okay, so now when we print out the value, so to print out a value, you still call the cout and you just write the variable name. So let's say if I want to print the value of b, okay, now I can write the less than b and the less than n. Then this one basically begin in the new line. Okay, now I said my b is equal to my a plus g. The value of my a is 4. I've stored 4 on the memory and I've stored 5 on the memory. So if I add these two values, 5 plus 4, the result, I will store it on the memory b that I reserved. Okay, so 4 plus 5 is going to be 9. So the result will be reserved, will be stored in the b reservation bits that are reserved on the memory. So now I can print out the content of what is in the b. So that is the less than b. The cout, like I told you, is for printing out information. So if you write cout then less than and you write b, it will display the result. So for example, if I write cout a, okay, or cout g, okay, then now when you are putting in a text, then you put it in a double quotation. Okay, so now I want it in such a way that my value of g will be here, then the text class will be here. Now my value of a will also be here. Okay, then I'll write a text which will be equal to, so I'll write a text which will be equal to, okay, now my result will be here. Okay, so here my value of my gene will be here, then there will be a test plus, then the value of my A will be here, then there will be a test of equal to. So this will read 4. This 4 is the gene is 5, so it's going to read 5 plus, then my A is 4 is equal to, then my B, when you add, you get what? 9, so it's equal to 9. Okay, now for a test variable, you put them in the double quotation. Okay, then now the ones stored on the memory, just their name will be enough. So the compiler will fetch what the value which is over there and display them. Okay, so here it will fetch the result which is over there. Here we are adding the test so that it will get complete sentence. So here we are creating the complete sentence. So the value stored on the memory of Gene will be here. Then we are adding the test plus. Then the value stored on the memory A will be here. Then we are adding the test equal to. And the value stored, which is the result of G and A, will be here. Okay, now let's run our code and see the result. Oh, this sentence, what's the problem? Let's take some. Okay, so now you can see we have 5 plus 4 is equal to what? 9. So the 5 was a global variable. We declare it outside the function, but we are able to access it because it's what? A global variable. So any function, any variable you declare outside the function, then those variables can be accessed within the function. But you cannot access your variable A here outside this function because it's within the curly bracket. So any variable you declare within the curly bracket, you can only use it within that curly bracket. You can use it outside. If you use it outside, you get a syntax error. Okay, I could have demonstrated that one with a function for you, but it's not advisable to put so many things to you when you are beginning the course. You get it. So when we get to function, we will also see some of these things. So what you should know is that a global variable is a variable outside a function. A function, it has a name and it has a curly bracket. So int main is a function. Okay, so any variable you declare within this curly bracket can only be accessed over here. But a variable you declare outside of all curly brackets can be accessed within the curly brackets, and those ones are called global. Global means you can go everywhere. Local, you are limited to the space where you have your boundary. So it's the same thing. They have the boundary here and there. So the local variables can only be used within their boundary. Now global, they don't have any boundary. They can be used here. If there is another curly brackets here, they can also be used over there. You get it? So far as they are outside of this curly bracket, they can be used anywhere. Okay, so thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the course. Now, if you want to contact me, you know this is week 1, so how you touch me. When you go to the home page, now if you've created a Kuulchat account, now you will see chat. Okay, if you've created a Kuulchat account and you've logged in, there will be chat with an instructor. But if you haven't logged in or you don't have a Kuulchat account, then you need to create one. Then once you've logged in and you come back to this course page, you will see chat with instructors here. Then you click on it. Then there will be a chat box where you can chat and send a message. And when I log into, I can also reply you. Okay. So thank you very much for taking this course and have a lovely day. Bye.